AirWreckRadio.com.
Here they come again. They heard that things were happening. With mics in front of faces, their lips begin to flatten. They talk about the world and local news reports. And if it's a week, they may even do some sports. They'll tell you all about the fall of Western civilization, the popularization of deregulation, the conspiratory allegory wars, and what we're losing when you're cruising through the news. The truth can be a bit elusive. Corey says, man, it's a goddamn joke. It's group of de facto, this democracy's a hoax. Some say the system's rigged, it's supposed to be. That's how they keep the power in dichotomocracy. Stacy says we gotta learn to think a little deeper. The symptoms of our problems hide the causes from our peepers. The merchants hook out, try to obfuscate the truth, doing whatever they can to keep the future from our youth. In these troubled times, it's hard to know just what to do, but if you stick around, we'll try to help you get you through. So go get a bowl, a spoon, and some cereal, and sit yourself down. It's time for AirWreck Radio.
It is the 15th day of December in the year 2017. I'm Corey.
And I want a hippopotamus for Christmas.
And this is AirWreck Radio. Thank you for joining us yet again, our loyalist of Wreckheads, here on 106.3 WRFZ Rochester. We have a wonderful, awesome, stupendous, tremendous Friday show planned for you this evening.
I want 5 more adjectives before I hear one commercial.
But first, this show and all the shows on Rochester Free Radio are made possible by listeners like you. If you and everyone you know donated just $1 for every show that you enjoyed, we can keep the lights burning and the wax turning here on WRFZ. So head over to RochesterFreeRadio.com and click on the big orange Patreon button for monthly donations. If monthly's too much commitment for you, it's the holidays, we understand. Go ahead and click on the little yellow button for our PayPal. Give a one-time donation directly through PayPal.
That's right. Tell them AirWreck Radio sent you, and you get a free indulgence. Stick it in Martin Luther's eye. It's all good.
Wow. Also, this episode and every episode of AirWreck Radio is made possible in part through the Cleanorama Laundromat. Located at 345 Jefferson Road, Henrietta, the Cleanorama features same-day drop-and-fold services and large commercial-grade machines. Visit the Cleanorama today and tell them AirWreck Radio says thank you.
I got a new tagline for Cleanorama. I'm still hammering it out here, but it's visit your mama at Cleanorama.
Laundry the way Mama does it.
That doesn't rhyme. See, we got to work on that one. That one needs work. Corey, why do we have a special, stupendous, tremendous, whatever, blah, blah, blah day today?
You were not even caught up to my adjectives, and you wanted 5 more.
I did. I expect it from you. From me, I expect less.
For a second Friday show in a row, we have very special guest in studio. We'd like to welcome back the UPW wrestlers. No, we're just joking. We have Rachel Barnhart from the Rachel Barnhart Show right here on Rochester Free Radio sitting in studio with us.
Hi, Rachel.
It's so nice to see you guys.
Thanks for coming out, Rachel. We really appreciate it.
No, it's nice to be here.
How do you like being on the radio as opposed to being on TV? Probably considerably less prep. Although I imagine you're...
Actually, it's really different. It's a different skill, and you do have to prepare for it. And you can't just sit here for an hour without things to talk about.
No, we've tried.
It's hard. It's hard. I'm still, we're still trying to get the word out that we're here. We want to take some phone calls from people, so we're building.
Yeah, you're going to do the phone calls thing?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm not sure we've decided on the phone calls thing.
I'm still split on it. I'd love to have the interaction, but with an hour-long show, I don't know that we, A, have the time in the format, and B, derailments.
We have a hard enough time. Yeah, that's it. We have a hard enough time not derailing each other from time to time.
Got it.
Phone calls sound fun, but dangerous, too.
And one of the things that I like about being here too is I can immediately podcast it and throw it up on my website, and so having the technology to be able to podcast something I think was really key.
I'm particularly excited about being on the radio now, considering that pretty soon it may become completely unaffordable to do a low-cost podcast.
Right, with net neutrality.
With any hope of distributing it to anybody. I mean, we can always cut it into like cassette tapes, and hand them out on the street.
Yeah, I don't know if the worst case scenarios are going to materialize, the slow lanes versus the fast lanes and content providers having to pay a lot more money. I don't know. I do think the time is now for municipal broadband.
Absolutely,
something that
no question.
Something I've been fighting for a long time. We have the infrastructure, we have the fiber network to connect all of our houses, whether it be the city or the county, to connect all of our homes and offer free or low-cost internet, low cost to businesses, maybe free to households. We can do this. It could be a public-private partnership. We could attract startups, particularly with net neutrality being repealed. We could be the place that startups want to come, knowing that their cost of internet will be stable, knowing that their content will be treated the same as everybody else's content. I just think the possibilities are endless. And don't forget educational opportunity. Half of city school children do not have internet at home. You need the internet now to do research papers, to do your homework, to even read textbooks in some cases. If you look at a map of who has internet in Rochester, high poverty neighborhoods have internet adoption rates of only 20 to 40% in their households. The issue isn't access. We have broadband lines, cable lines going through every single neighborhood. But if people can't afford to connect, or they don't know how to connect, or they don't have the equipment to connect, that's a problem.
What do you think the big hurdles are between that? Because I think there's plenty of room in the market for
politics.
I mean, you look at the market for internet, and it's everywhere you go, everywhere you look, you got like 5 carriers, and really they're like 2 carriers, because it's based on, like, you have your home internet, you got perhaps 3 options for that, but it goes with whatever your cable company is in most cases, and your mobile internet, which is whatever your cell phone is.
Right.
And so there's plenty of options, but they're not that you as a consumer. It comes down to you consume 2 different options, and that's it.
Right. So how many of us pay for 2 different internet plans, right? We pay for our smartphone plan and we pay for our home plan. If you don't have a lot of money, you might not be able to afford either one, but which one would you choose? You'd probably go for the smartphone one, because it might be something that's more practical for you. But again, that's a problem for kids. No one ever invented anything on their smartphone or did their homework or research paper on their smartphone. Smartphones also have data caps. That's something else to think about, particularly the lower cost plans. So you can't use them to stream stuff. You can't use them to as hotspots.
No, because you end up getting throttled.
Absolutely.
You
have to pay extra for data.
You're a kid. You're just a kid, a minor, a child student, and you're dealing with whatever plan your parents got for you. If you were fortunate enough that your parents got you a plan, and if you're not like several of the largest carriers claim, we don't data cap. I don't agree with the truthiness of that statement.
Sure, there's a lot of evidence that there's throttling going on. You asked what are the barriers. I think politics is a huge one. I mean, one of the things that I did yesterday after this net neutrality repeal, I looked up charter communication donations to our local politicians. Just this year alone, and in some cases just last month, they have given thousands of dollars to Mayor Lovely Warren, Assemblyman Joe Morelli, the Monroe County Democratic Committee, State Senators Joe Robach and Rich Funke. And this matters because you can never prove a quid pro quo in politics, but there's no question that campaign cash is meant to influence.
So I used to, this is a topic that's very close to my heart. I used to lobby with an organization called Wolfpack.
Oh, yes.
And doing that, I've been to the Senate and the Assembly, and I've spoken to the majority of Democrats and Republicans, and it's, you can't convince these people that, hey, I mean, many of them, they're like, yes, it is a problem, but what do you want me to do about it? I've got to get reelected. And it's so frustrating because the system is, they can take that money because it's coming from, human beings, and it's speech now. We've converted money into speech in almost all circumstances, effectively all circumstances, and it's allowed capture of our political institutions.
Listen,
but
I've now
how
run
do you
2
fix
races.
that?
I've now run 2 races where I have run headlong into money problems, and you realize the power of money. You realize that the person who has the most money will be heard. And you're whispering and they're yelling when they have that much more money. I mean, hey, I'm making them spend a lot of money to feed me. But it is a problem when you're knocking on doors and people don't know anything about you. Why don't they know anything about you? Because the media is not robust and you don't have the money to bomb their mailboxes.
And you say you're making them spend a lot of money, but I think the real problem there is that, like,
they have it.
They not just do they have it. It doesn't take it when a politician gets campaign dollars. I mean, I'm not saying they're not working for those dollars, but like they're working for those dollars in order to maintain their cush $100,000+ a year job with awesome health care.
Yeah. So you mentioned maintain. Anytime you're elected, the system works to maintain the status quo.
Absolutely.
Because people are getting stuff. Everyone's getting stuff. So running against incumbents, something I don't ever want to do again. Running against incumbents is really hard because the system moves in sync to protect those incumbents no matter what party they're in, because people don't like change. People with money, corporations, governments, unions, people don't want change because they know what they have a known quantity and they can work with that quantity and they have invested in that quantity. And this new person comes along, especially someone like me who says, I want to reform campaign finance. I think that we should have publicly financed elections. I don't think this should work this way anymore.
Now,
people lose their minds.
You were running for the assembly because you're not going to do that from the mayor, from the mayor's seat. But when you were running for the assembly, that's something that you could
absolutely
I mean, there's not a lot you can do, but
something from the mayor, from the city hall, sure you can. So one of the things that I proposed in my campaign for mayor was don't take any money from developers who have pending projects or are going to bid on an RFP. Don't take money from vendors, city vendors, and don't take money from city employees. I mean, there are things that you can do in the absence of something codified.
You can say I'm not going to do this, but you can say that, but your opponent, particularly if your opponent is is the person who ran for the Republican Party,
sure,
he's not gonna.
No.
He's not going to make that agreement, and it's going to cause a problem for you.
Right. If I was elected, so I think one of the ways to do that is to say, look, after I'm elected, we're going to put this into law. And you can, there are some things you can put into law on a citywide basis, but there's no question we need statewide campaign finance reform.
I mean, it needs to be federally. Honestly,
well, yes.
It's my opinion. To make it meaningful, it has to be. You have to overturn Citizens United.
The problem is Citizens United, but that doesn't mean. So what Citizens United did, for example, in New York State, just because of Citizens United, you can't donate $1 million to Lovely Warren's campaign. Okay, you still can't do that. There are mechanisms that you can use a super PAC to spend money on Lovely Warren's campaign.
Right, you can open a nonprofit.
That kind of
a
thing.
Special kind of 501c3, C4, whatever it is.
Or a super PAC, which is an
at which point it's anonymous money, came from nowhere.
Dark money.
Yeah.
Or you can open an independent expenditure. I mean, there are mechanisms to do it. There are ways to do it. But there are still limits. There are still limits in New York. I mean, the system is broken, don't get me wrong, but there are still limits on what you can do. And there are still things that we can do to make sure that that the playing field is more level. So if you have publicly financed elections, you could put into place rules saying, Rachel, you're not allowed to spend more than $100,000 on this campaign, and neither are your opponents. Now, if the super PAC wants to come in and help, that they can do that.
Right.
But
as long as they don't, talk to you about it first.
I wouldn't have any control over their message. I wouldn't be able to talk to them. They could send out stuff that's appalling to me to try to get me to win. It's not ideal, but that's the way the system is set up right now. And, I've been making a big deal over the fact, since the mayoral primary, Lovely Warren broke even the rules that we have. She, instead of having an independent expenditure, she created a political action committee and used that committee to funnel $150,000 worth of spending on her campaign that she controlled. So
that must be nice.
That was, it was infuriating. First of all,
I'm sure for you it wasn't.
First of all, I think she would have won anyway. Don't get me wrong. I do think she would have won anyway, but But she broke the law, and I do think she's going to face felony charges, perhaps next year or the year after. I mean, it takes time to investigate these
absolutely,
things.
yeah.
But I do think what happened here was unprecedented in New York State. No, not all politicians do that. If all politicians were allowed to do that, we'd all have multiple campaign accounts and have our donors donate the max to each one.
That's one thing that touches on a topic that drives me nuts. When you're talking to your friends, people outside of people who don't know because they haven't put their toe in at all, and you hear this line repeated frequently: they're all crooks.
Yeah, well, the cynicism.
Really? How many have you met?
The level of cynicism in politics is so difficult to combat. I'm still an idealist. I still think there's a place for idealism in politics, and I'm not ashamed to say that I still believe that we can have good government and we can have rules and we can follow those rules. I believe that with all my heart. But when I talk to voters over the last couple of years, battling that cynicism is difficult. I've actually had voters say to me, I really like you. I think you do great things, but I'm not voting for you because you don't belong there. Or they'd say to me,
thanks.
Or they would say to me, you won't be able to make a difference. You're great, but you're not going to make a difference. So they're going to vote for the guy that they know
is also not going to make a difference.
Right. And so those kinds of attitudes are real. They are so real.
I think it's a big part of why we find ourselves in the situation we're in right now. I mean, I'm not talking about stupid people. I'm talking about people who are my friends, and I'm a blue collar person when I'm not doing fancy radio stuff.
Oh, fancy.
Very fancy radio stuff here. But so I hang out primarily with a lot of blue collar people, and unfortunately, a significant proportion of them I completely disagree with politically. And the difference between them and me is I've taken the time to try to understand the issues. I've put myself in there and tried to learn about it. And
that raises an interesting point, though. We hear the term low information voter.
Yeah.
Right? I hate that term.
It's an insult.
It's a total insult. But
nobody hears that term and thinks, oh, that's me. I'm that.
Here's the reality.
No, they hear dummy.
Yeah.
Is what they hear
when
you say
Are you calling me stupid?
Stupid?
Yeah.
Yeah, but here's the reality. People are busy.
Mm-hmm.
People may not have time to turn on the television or read the paper or go to your website. They may not know. So remember, I was saying I was knocking on doors and people really didn't know much about me. Was that their fault? I would argue it's not their fault.
There's no incentive for them.
Well,
it's not that there's no incentive, but it's the very low saliency
without
incentive.
Public campaign financing, it's really difficult for a candidate like me, whom the establishment does not in any way, shape, or form want anywhere near elected office, because they know that I want public financing of elections, that I want to make the playing field even. I want to make sure that citizens come first, not corporations, and they don't want that. So they're not going to give me their money. Mm-hmm. And they want to maintain the status quo. So is that the voters' fault? I would argue no. It's the system's fault that I haven't been able to send them as much mail so that they know who I am. Mail is very effective.
Which is absurd. Aside from, you're a name around town. People know. They know you were a trusted news anchor.
They knew who I was, but they didn't know what I stood for. There's a difference.
Oh, man. All right. So I believe that there's some truth to that. But all the times that I spent watching you on the news, I was like, I bet Rachel's a Democrat.
Don't watch the news. Right. So people who followed me on Facebook and Twitter and watched me on the news, I think had a pretty good sense of who I was. But not everyone does.
Sure.
And so when I got into politics, one of the things that surprised me was when you're a reporter, man, you think everybody's reading your stuff. You think they're informed about elections. And
that's how I feel about this show.
It doesn't really work that way. When you get in the trenches and you try to reach voters and you realize how difficult it is. I mean, I knocked on 5,000 doors this past summer. And maybe 1 out of 4 people were home. That's a lot of people I talked to, and a lot of doors where people know I stopped by, because I always leave a card saying, I was here. Sorry, I missed you. But think about that. All that effort that I put in to
so much time to talk to 1,200 people.
To talk to 1 out of 4 people.
Yeah.
And every vote I got, so I got 3,300 votes, but every vote I got was. It, to me, felt like a small victory because I wasn't able to do advertising on the radio or television, and the media really didn't do a lot of issues-based stories. And what I found was that when I was on XXI or when I did do, when people saw me and heard me, they liked me. But getting heard is so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And that's why I just so believe that we need campaign finance reform to give other voices a chance and to make sure that voters get the information. It's not their fault. So we can't blame voters. It's not their fault. But that's why the system needs to be reformed so that at least all candidates can touch a voter at least once.
Sure. To your point about how it was how the media, local media used, in the very recent past, used to be good at issues-based things, and I can't help but notice that.
They still are if they want to.
They all show, we got 3 channels that I don't have cable, so I got 3 channels that come just through the wire, through the internet wire to my TV, and they're like ABC, CBS, Fox. And that's it. I don't get WHEC anymore.
The networks. I
don't know what happened there.
On my antenna, I don't get HEC either anymore.
Yeah, it's just
gone. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
I don't either. I did another scan today.
It's just quietly gone.
I know.
And CBS and Fox are the same show. You're watching local news.
It's 13 and Fox.
Is it 13 and Fox?
Yes. Yeah.
How can there's no pressure for them to do good journalism because there's no you get sponsors by.
Well,
I suspect there's a sponsorship issue.
That's not it. This is a really complicated issue, and I don't think it has anything to do with an agenda or a conspiracy or anything like that. It has to do with resources, and so when you have a lot of experienced reporters, you're going to get more issues-based stuff. You're going to get more government accountability work and investigative work. You don't have a lot of experienced reporters anymore.
No, they're all kids.
They don't have the capacity, and I'm not saying that they won't one day, but they really don't have the capacity to do the kind of work that's necessary to hold our government accountable, which is a main function of the media, which keeps our democracy going. They don't have the capacity.
I don't think there's enough flavors out there for them for news. But again, I'm sorry.
But it's a resource issue. That's a direct function of pay. By the time these reporters get seasoned, they have to move on because they can't make a living here, and so another community. But then you have an entire generation of reporters that has absolutely no institutional knowledge of Rochester. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm 41 years old. When my generation dies out, when we stop being in news, that's it. There will be no more institutional knowledge of this community residing in any significant critical mass number of reporters. Done.
I feel that there's a similar issue in politics right now, is that Generation X in particular. Now, I'm the oldest millennial. There are no millennials older than me.
Gave you
what do you
classification.
consider
now
millennial?
You're Xenial.
I consider it 1980.
I follow
I'm
the
before
Goldman Sachs
1980.
rule, which is the 1980 rule.
Okay, so you're above
so
1980.
I'm 81.
Okay.
So I guess there are some millennials older than me.
You're an older millennial.
Yes. And I can't help but notice when I look at politics, there's no Gen Xers out there because the boomers won't get out of the way. There's a few. I think Kristen Gillibrand is probably Gen X.
She's a Gen Xer.
Yeah. She's the only person I can think of, though, who's out there who's like, you look at the big names in politics, and they are, and obviously they're gonna be the big names because they've been here so long.
The presidential candidate the Democrats nominated in 2020, I believe, will be a Gen Xer.
I certainly hope so. And I like Bernie, but I don't want a 90-year-old president.
It's so funny. My politics just really aligned with Bernie Sanders, but I was just dedicated to Hillary, and in hindsight, I totally understand why people had a problem with that. It's like, especially given my own battles with the Democratic Party locally, it would just have made sense for me to gravitate towards Bernie. But I was a Hillary fan.
I was also, because I'm a pragmatic person, I really liked Bernie, but I was also Hillary the whole way. Corey hated me for it.
Yep.
He's a Bernie bro. Not unreasonably so, but still.
Right.
I wouldn't call myself.
I would like to see. I don't know how I feel about Kirsten Jill. I have mixed feelings about her. I think she's doing wonderfully right now. She's really kicking butt. I don't like the fact she probably could not name our mayor.
I feel that, but I'm a little.
Could Chuck?
Chuck could. Oh my God. Chuck could probably name your grandmother.
Yeah, sure.
And the names of your children.
Wait, is there a camera on? Oh, hi, Chuck.
He's a master at it. He's a master at PR, and he's a master of piggybacking on local issues. The guy, but he's here, he's present, and I know that he knows our community.
Well, he saved the town you work in, Stacey.
He certainly did.
Like almost single-handedly Superman style.
I don't dislike Chuck Schumer, but I
love him.
I
love him. He's great.
My problem is who's going to be his replacement. What's going to happen when Chuck Schumer says, "All right, I'm old. I've had enough." There's going to be a giant vacuum, and Democrats, in my opinion, do not do a good job of securing their future legacies. Like making sure that they replace a Democrat.
We have
with a
no
Democrat.
bench. I mean, look at locally. We have no bench at all. I mean, there's just no bench.
No depth chart.
No, there's really no bench for both Republicans and Democrats. It's not just a Democrat issue locally. It's also a Republican issue. On the state level, Governor Cuomo will be up next year. I am really hoping he is primaried. I thought
that'd be great.
I thought it would be Stephanie Miner from Syracuse, but now she's reconsidering running against John Katko. He's the congressman out there. He's a Republican. That is a swing district, and it leans Democrat. But he's a Republican and won. I think she could really... taking him on makes more sense. It just makes more sense. I also think that Zephyr Teachout would be... do it again, Zephyr. Run against Cuomo again.
Boy,
I love her.
I don't know if Zephyr Teachout's got the... because that's a very... that's a high name, there's not a lot of name recognition amongst a lot of New Yorkers.
Really?
I don't think a lot of farmers know who she is.
Well, she got 35% of the vote against Cuomo in 2014 and shocked everybody. I mean, usually if somebody gets 35% of the vote, you don't sit there and say, good job. I mean, people were just so impressed with her. I love her. I think she could do. She's a progressive darling.
I mean, I'm a big fan myself. I just am concerned that she's what, Harvard professor? Is that
Fordham Law, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know she wrote Corruption in America, was that her book? Yeah.
And she has a political action committee called the Anti-Corruption League. And so I started my own political action committee, Rochester for All, kind of based on kind of like taking a page out of her book, thinking, you know what? I think anti-corruption and good government is something nobody's really talking about.
I wanted to talk to you about your political action committee, as a matter of fact, because I heard that you had one, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I hate those things. But I understand that it's not nice to blanket hate things because obviously there's good reasons to have political action committees.
Ours is not going to be overflowing with money. I mean, I don't think so. but we would like to be able to support some local and statewide candidates as is needed. I think a nice way to support people is through financial donations. And so, but we started as a political action committee because you can do that really quickly right away. You can open that, and we wanted to get going in October. But Rochester for All is this name, but Rochester for All will get nonprofit status in January. We didn't want to have to fill out a 990 for this calendar year. We said, let's start
one full year
2018.
Yeah.
And that'll be ready to go in January. We're going to be a nonprofit.
And what's your plan of action?
Well, we want Rochester for All to be a watchdog good government group. Think Citizens Union, think Reclaim New York, those kinds of groups where you focus on, of course, Reclaim, I think, is funded by Republican Mercers, and that's different. But their focus, though, is on good government, and it's on transparency. And I think that Rochester for All, there is a vacuum in our community. There are very few voices talking about campaign finance. There are very few voices.
I know.
There are very few voices calling out our politicians when they do bad things. Rochester can be very clubby.
Yep.
We're a very smug town. We can be very clubby. People in power don't like to knock each other. And the media doesn't really want to take on people in power as much as they used to. Again, I think it's a resource issue. It's not an agenda issue. And doing crime and all that kind of stuff, that's just easy. Anyone can do that. It's easy. It's much harder to stick a microphone in the county executive's face and ask tough questions. That's hard. And so we think that we can do some of this watchdog journalism work and continue to play a role in calling for certain reforms. I mean, fighting for broadband internet, fighting for some criminal justice reforms, fighting for walkable neighborhoods. I mean, there are things that I fought for in my campaign that translate very well into this agenda. But if we had to boil it down to just one or two things that I think Rochester for All will be hyper focused on, it's good government and ethics.
And so, what's a walkable neighborhood? I've never heard that.
Oh, yeah.
Is that just like I can safely walk my neighborhood? Is that what that
Sidewalks,
is?
Stacey.
Walkable neighborhoods have sidewalks, bike lanes, complete streets. There are places that are interesting and safe. And
When you guys fix
think Park
Henrietta,
Ave.
Rochester, can you come to Henrietta and
Right?
get us some sidewalks?
Well, hey, when I campaigned in Henrietta and Chi Life, sidewalks came up frequently.
We did a parade for you. I wanted to bring this
Yes.
up because I thought it was
I
a hilarious
know.
thing that somebody said. We did the Chi Life parade
Yes.
with you.
I
when you
won
were running
Chi
for
Life, by the
assembly.
way.
And we walked by some guy's house, and this guy, he just yells out, "Rachel doesn't care about the suburbs," and I yelled, "I'm from the suburbs," but I couldn't help but think, like, hey, come on, man,
Well, neither did my opponent either. I mean, I won the suburbs. People, when I went door to door out in the suburbs, people had no idea who my opponent was. They didn't see him. But I know where that comes from, and it's not an entirely unfair criticism. I have always been a champion of the city. I believe that the city is not doing very well. The city has high poverty and has some financial issues. So, but being a fierce advocate for the city does not mean
Right.
that you hate the suburbs.
And it's such a, I thought it was such a childish
Choosing-
thing for a guy to sit out amongst his neighbors and say,
Yeah.
this person who I've never spoken to definitely doesn't care about me, and look at how much help I need from my city, my state government.
Choosing to live in the city, and I'm a huge advocate for walkable neighborhoods, city living, a big advocate. I do not want to live in the suburbs, but if you want to, rock on.
Right.
And if I'm your representative, I will fight tooth and nail for you. But that doesn't mean you hate the suburbs. It doesn't mean you hate the suburbs. But I have been very honest for a very long time that I don't like driving. I like living in a walkable neighborhood again.
In today's
and-
political climate, it is left or right. It's black and white. So you're either for the suburbs or
Right.
you're for the city. You cannot be for both.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stand on my front porch and announce that too.
And
Right.
even when I
Couple
ran
thousand
for
people.
mayor, I was acutely aware of some elements of my platform that could be used against me in the future. I had a real city first economic development agenda. I really believe that.
Well, as the mayor, what else?
Correct.
I mean,
but
Thank
I do believe though that when you're giving out tax incentives, you have to look at, is the company on a transit line? Because do you know how many companies are locating in Henrietta and then go to
I
RTS?
do, and I'm so sick of them.
Well, but they go to RTS and they say, "Help us get our workers here," and RTS says, "I'm sorry, we can't run a bus that for 6 people,"
Yeah.
and it's not economical. And we need to be taking all of these things into account when we start handing out these tax breaks. And so. If anyone's saying, well, that's not free market. Well, it's not free market when you're asking for tax breaks. So if you want government help, we need to be taking a holistic look at this. Okay, where do your workers, where do you think they live? Do you think they live in this city? Well, you might want to be on a bus line. If are they low wage, you might want to be on a bus line.
I mean, there's so much. This is a topic that drives me nuts because I live in Henrietta. This isn't a secret to anybody. I live in Henrietta, and our county executive, right? Yeah, that's his title. Our town supervisor, Jack Moore, who is thankfully
Former town
Well, no,
supervisor.
he's still the town supervisor until inauguration day, which I don't know when that is because I'm a low
probably
information
January.
voter.
He'll probably be sworn in New Year's Day or January 2nd.
I can't wait to see this guy's backside. Goodbye, Jack. He is very, very pro bringing business into Henrietta, and listen, I'm not against business, but like they've cleared so much swampland in Henrietta to put parking lots in, and that affects me because I have a basement, and my house is where a swamp was once, and as you start getting rid of the swamps around, not just my house, but roughly all of the houses in Henrietta, you start eliminating that swampland. All that water that drains, that's got to go somewhere, and where it goes is into my basement. And you know who doesn't have good flood insurance? Anybody in New York.
Yeah.
Nobody has that, and you don't expect it to. You don't notice that it's going to be a problem until there's around your house. There's within the 3-mile circumference. There's a bunch of freshly dug up new parking lots going in for not consumer goods. I mean, for jobs. It's jobs, but people in Henrietta have jobs. you don't go to Henrietta and then get the job.
Yeah,
There's people in the city
the sprawl
need jobs.
Yeah, the sprawl of jobs to far-flung places, which includes Henrietta, is something that has concerned me for a really long time. And I don't think that makes me anti-suburbs. I think it makes me smart growth planning.
Put your construction, your factories and things like that. Put those together in one place,
right?
Where a lot of workers can get to them easily.
I remember, when I worked at Channel 13 and the Calkins Road new Wegmans opened, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's just up the road." Well, and I put it on my, I don't want to say timed, but I measured the distance as to. And it was almost 2 miles, and I'm thinking that's just that in Henrietta. 2 miles is just up the road.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
And for me, everything in my life right now is pretty much within a 2 mile radius, like within that radius.
Sure.
I live 1 mile from here. I've walked here before.
That's one of the biggest things I miss about living in the city is the variation of choice of what's around you.
Right.
When you live in the city, you have such an advantage. Like you don't know what an advantage you have.
I drive 5,000 to 6,000 miles a year.
Oh man.
And I know that not everyone can do that, especially people with families. I know not everyone can do that, but that's the lifestyle that I choose. And do I advocate that lifestyle? I mean, you've got to do what makes you happy.
Sure.
But again, that doesn't mean I hate the suburbs.
So why do you hate the suburbs?
But I do think, though, and when I was helping the Webster Town Supervisor candidate, the Democrat John Hutchings, we went door to door out there, and a big concern out there was growth, traffic, and removing green space. It was a huge concern, and it's wrong to assume that suburbs have to be these giant commercial centers. People don't necessarily want that.
Yeah, not every suburb needs a 4-lane superhighway with just a giant shopping district.
Henrietta is probably, downtown Rochester has always been the center of our commercial, civic, cultural life. I don't know that you can say commercial anymore. I mean, Henrietta might actually be the center of our commerce.
It's Henrietta and Greece.
I would say
they're
that
split
for
between
sure,
those two towns. Henrietta's modeled after Greece. They turned Jefferson Road into Ridge Road.
The taxes in Henrietta are so low, which explains why a lot of places want to go out there. They could build new, but this is an issue that local leaders have to, in conjunction with economic development agencies, with the state and the county, can really tackle and talk about together if it matters to them. I know it matters to the transit agency. I know it matters to a lot of people, but it's going to take some leadership. And, it was something I talked about during the mayoral campaign, but I do remember thinking at one point, I was like, well, if one day I want to run for something else, that includes suburbs, then someone could come back and, do the whole she hates the suburbs thing again. But
and I think that's just an invalid criticism, because when you talk about economic development, especially you're running for the mayor.
But I have been very strident about my advocacy for the city. And I remember when I worked at 13, I had a colleague who was very upset that I wrote a blog about, I wish I worked downtown, not out here in Henrietta. And this person just
oh yeah, because they used to be. Are they still? Right on West Henrietta Road?
Oh, yeah, way out there, past the Marketplace Mall. And this person was offended by what I wrote. Saying that they grew up in a suburb. They love this. I'm like, again, that doesn't mean you hate the suburbs. It just means
you
that...
You work in the media. You should want to be in a city.
Right. Literally, I would get in my car in Cornhill, drive 6 miles to Channel 13, get in a news car, drive back downtown.
Right, exactly.
My entire day was spent in a car. And I just... it was just miserable. It was absolutely miserable.
On one of the worst roads that the Rochester
it's
area.
So ugly.
West Henrietta Road is atrocious.
I live on
ugly.
West Henrietta Road.
Yeah.
I live in Henrietta. I've lived in Henrietta besides, last decade or so. And I don't walk or ride my bike anywhere. There's no sidewalks, so I'm going to be killed.
Isn't it terrible to see people waiting for the bus with no sidewalks on West Henrietta Road?
Sitting on shopping carts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They lay shopping carts down so they have somewhere to sit, because there's no benches or a booth or anything.
Yeah.
I used to live in the city, and I'd bicycle to Henrietta because I was stupid and young and didn't know the value of not being run over by a car. Since being run over by a car, I can tell you there is absolutely zero chance you'd catch me on a bicycle anywhere in Henrietta on a road.
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts because there's so many nice roads. Like Henrietta is full of good suburban roads where good suburban people live and want to ride their good suburban bicycles, but can't because you cannot stop suburbanites from texting and driving.
No,
it's impossible.
But you also, those are really high-speed roads too. And in the city with 30 miles an hour, if you get hit by a car going 30 miles an hour, your chances of survival are a lot better if you get hit by a car going 50 miles an hour. And there is a movement now to lower the speed limit to 25 or even 20, and the reason is if you get hit, your odds of surviving are better, and the slower you go, the less likely you are to get in a car crash. There's lots of reasons to do it. I'm in favor of it. I don't, but it can't be done in a vacuum. You also have to consider street design and everything else, because a road like Lake Ave, I don't care what they put the speed limit at, people are going to go 50 miles an hour. Well, and that's the thing is
I'm not ready to agree with you yet on lowering the speed limit.
Nobody is.
I think it's a tax on poor people because they speed. And I mean,
if it's enforced, I mean,
and that's the other thing is like, how do you enforce a 20 mile an hour? Does a radar gun even properly read 20 mile an hour speeds? You know,
do we want to talk about individual calibrated radar guns?
Right.
Or like,
yeah.
Well, one of the things that I proposed during the campaign, and I've been a huge proponent of this, is Vision Zero. It's a program where it's a holistic approach to traffic safety. It takes into account road design. We know that if you build a wide road, you're going to speed because you feel really comfortable going fast.
Right. Jefferson Road.
Right. We know that their enforcement is key. I mean, right now in the city, there's not a lot of traffic enforcement going on. In the suburbs, there's a little bit more. On the highways, there's more. But in the city, there's almost no traffic enforcement. And also education, letting people know that, okay, these are the rules about bikes and pedestrians. You got to stop for them in the crosswalk. Please don't weave in and out of traffic, So those things together have been proven. Vision Zero is a program that started in Sweden. It's now in New York City. It actually does reduce injuries and deaths.
Man, those Nordic countries are always proving stuff that nobody in America wants to hear.
New York City, you're more likely to get ticketed for failure to yield, or if you try to jump a light, or if you are an aggressive driver. I mean, aggressive driving, I can't tell you how many cars, sometimes they think I'm going too slow. They go into the opposite lane of traffic to pass me, and of course then we both end up at the same red light. But that kind of behavior is really dangerous.
And as somebody who has been an aggressive driver, when I was a 20-year-old man.
Yes.
We've all
gone through phases when we were young people where you just learning how to drive and you were,
Stacy makes me grab my change purse when we drive.
I think that there's a problem because you grow as you grow older. You begin to notice that, hey, man, all that effort I put into passing that stupid person who was in my stupid way, all that did was put us at the light next to each other, and now I look like what I look like.
Well, I've noticed too that my level of patience while driving is just so much better than it used to be. And I still drive with people my age, even older, who are very impatient. They're just so impatient when they get behind the wheel. Everyone else is a problem on the road, and this person won't speed up, and oh my God, this person maybe had to stop at this light, and everyone's just really stressed out behind the wheel. And I think part of Vision Zero is just kind of letting people know, you just relax. We're all going to get where we got to go.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned that there's little to no traffic enforcement in the city. Yeah. Why is that? Is it just a low number workforce?
Our police are busy running from call to call,
doing real police work.
There's not a lot of proactive stuff in terms of traffic. I mean, in order to have real good traffic enforcement, you would have to have a detail. Now, you can't do it like Buffalo. Buffalo has checkpoints. That's not really traffic enforcement, though. That's just looking for inspection stickers.
That's the dirty.
And that is profiling. Yeah. And that is profiling.
Yeah.
And so they're actually under investigation now by the state attorney general for their checkpoints.
See, like in New York City, you mentioned they have a beat officer on almost every corner.
Yeah.
So is that the difference between a checkpoint and how New York's being so effective in that
Sure.
I
think in order to enforce traffic in Rochester, you'd probably put out a public education campaign and say, listen, if you are weaving in and out of traffic, being a jerk, we are going to ticket you.
I think a public education campaign is probably the right way to go here,
Absolutely.
rather than like increase. Certainly cheaper than paying for more police officers.
Right. Well, enforcement doesn't mean you got someone on 24 hours a day. It could be one day a week. You're sitting up there on Lake Avenue for a couple hours. People get the message.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
People get the message. And but I think but in Lake Avenue is like shooting fish in a barrel. I call it the Wild West of driving in Rochester.
I used to motorcycle Lake Avenue regularly, and after I got hit, I was like, nope, I am never going anywhere near that road or several others again.
We have vehicle crashes, pedestrian crashes, bicycle crashes on Lake Avenue. Lake Avenue, even after they reconstructed it, maybe 10 years ago to make it safer, I still think it's got medians in the middle for pedestrians. It's still got problems because it's
four
a
lanes,
speedway.
and it's 4 lanes.
Remember, it used to be 6.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what's that? The Red Line is about Lake Avenue.
Racing down Lake Avenue.
Yeah.
That's one of the lyrics in the song.
It's not a new problem. And it's like...
I grew up right off of Lake Avenue.
It's one of those roads that's like crazy, because
my parents live off Lake Ave.
It's a place I used to ride bicycle, and it's one of those areas where, do I want to ride in the road and take that risk, or ride in the sidewalk and take that risk? And either way, it's a giant risk, because there's cars parked on the street and cars speeding and cars changing lanes.
Yeah, and I mean, under the administration of Tom Richards, they wanted to do a road diet up in Charlotte to reduce it from 4 lanes to 2 or 3, and the center would be a turning lane. And people lost their minds.
Well, I bet you
Lovely Warren, agreed with the people and said, "Nah, we're not going to do the road diet."
I bet you a lot of those business owners down north towards the end, down towards the beach, would have a problem with you constricting the traffic and making it harder to get in and out of there.
Well, that's the thing about road diets, and they're having this debate right now in Brighton and Pittsford with the Route 96 project.
Mm-hmm.
Route 96, there's a lot of traffic backed up every day. It's a 4-lane road. But a funny thing happens when you make something 3 lanes with that middle being a turning lane. All of a sudden, you're not waiting for people to make left-hand turns anymore.
Right.
You're not seeing people weave back and forth in lanes. It actually doesn't slow you down that much.
I'm a big fan of middle lane turn.
Absolutely.
The middle turn lane, because it gets the traffic out of the... Because, all right, so when you're making a left-hand turn, this is just
nobody has to wait for you
mind-blowing radio
anymore.
right here, but when you're making a left-hand turn from a 4-lane road, you're stopping what is, in most circumstances, the fast lane.
Right.
Now you got lines of cars cutting over.
It's just a different way to think about a road diet is a different way to think about it. Road diets also open up space for protected bike lanes, which would make you feel safer to ride. There's maybe even parking. I mean, there's a lot you can do with a road diet. I understand the fear about getting to the lake, but you're really talking maybe a few Saturdays a year where I think you'd have a problem. The hottest Saturdays of the year.
And those are the times where you would have a problem
anyway. You'd be sitting in traffic anyway.
Right.
And that's where I think the city could get creative in terms of park at one of those giant parking lots at Kodak and everybody take a shuttle up there.
We need some more of those stupid...
I like the park and ride.
We need some more of those ridiculous... what's that diamond thing they did on Winton Road?
Why do you want to be sitting in traffic anyway?
The double diamond?
The double cross diamond.
That thing. That's what the Winton Road thing.
Yeah.
So I used to deliver pizza in Brighton out of Winton Plaza.
Right.
And I got to know that road, that 590 interchange, very, very well. And the whole problem was just that the left turn light was timed wrong in every instance. Everywhere there was a left turn light in that area, the French Road, 590, Winton Road area. And what do they do instead of... I don't know what it would cost to reprogram these lights, but it would have alleviated the problem. Instead, they spent $100 billion or whatever it was to...
Those are factual
to the diverging
numbers.
diamond.
To the diverging
that's what it was.
diamond. That's what it's called.
Double diverging. I'm a big fan of the roundabout.
I mean, I am too.
I love these.
You don't have to stop at a
roundabouts.
stoplight. You just slow down and just go around the
And
circle.
I've never seen traffic held up at one.
No.
The only time I have seen it, it's when people are completely lost and they've pulled up to it and stopped because they're terrified.
Or the one by the Midtown Manor downtown, people drop off. They drop people off to the apartment building. They think it's like a drop-off loop.
Good.
It's like, no, it's not a
This
drop-off loop.
road's just for me.
So that's a little tough because you've got people with disabilities getting out of cars and they've actually had to post signs like, this isn't where you drop people off. You're supposed to turn in front of the building to drop people off. But I can understand why that's really confusing. But no, roundabouts are actually really safe. They're so safe. People don't get hit by cars in roundabouts.
No, not generally, no.
This is...
Like No, you just walk around the outside.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
So traffic safety is a really important issue, and it's one that is getting more attention in Rochester. So it's a good thing.
What I want to shift gears here because I have a big question for you.
Yes.
You're the mayor. Let's say you're the mayor right now. How do you fix education?
Right.
No pressure.
No pressure. Yeah, easy question. Nice softball to round things off with.
No, we talked about this during the campaign. I feel really passionately that that separate is not equal, and that we can't continue to have segregated schools. We need racial and socioeconomic diversity. How do you do that without going countywide? Which there really is no mechanism, political will. I think it would be very difficult to do that.
Yeah, it would be a very hard sell.
I would be willing to try to sell it, but I think you've got to do some other things in the meantime. I really believe in integration, and I think we have to talk about what integration means, okay? You will hear a lot of activists, particularly African-American activists, say, well, white children don't need to go to school with black children for black children to learn. Of course they don't. But
a vacuum.
But what we do need, integration means buy-in from the entire community. Mm-hmm. Integration means all of children's fates are tied together. Integration means you don't have one group of people opting out of the system. And that's what we have. So we have, in the city of Rochester, there's something like several thousand white children under the age of 5. And by the time they're in high school, there's only like 700 white kids left in the city.
Because they've all either been transplanted or moved private.
They left. I mean, this is the population.
Yeah,
They left. And so of the 700 kids remaining, of course, not all of them choose to go to the city school district. Some may go to private school.
You can even get passes to go to Henrietta or Greece.
And I would argue that, so some people think that the charter school movement is the way to solve this problem because charter schools are having more success in some cases than our city schools. Charter schools are doing as well. Our best charter schools are doing as well as our best city schools. Our best city schools have one thing in common. They're socioeconomically diverse because they have buy-in from an entire neighborhood or an entire community, like World of Inquiry, School of Arts.
So how do you achieve?
And charter schools, I would say, too, I think are a great way for white people to say we're helping minority kids without having to send my own kids to school with minority kids.
How do you justify that? I'm curious about how. I know that's not what you're saying,
no,
obviously.
And so charter schools are not equal, though.
Absolutely
we
not.
have to stop comparing them to failing urban schools and start comparing them to successful affluent schools. One of the things that Lovely Warren did when I was debating her at the Rotary Club, she says Brown versus Board of Education was wrong. I couldn't believe those words came out of her mouth. She said black kids don't need to go to school with white kids. We have charter school where she named a charter school. 98% of the kids graduate. Okay. But what's happening with those 98% of those children? What courses did they take? Are they ready to go to college? Are they going to college? What colleges are they going to? I guarantee you, if you lined up that charter school with Pittsford Sutherland, you are not going to, or even Gates Chili or East Rochester or name a suburban school. I guarantee you that charter school's kids are not achieving at the same level as our more affluent populace. So separate is not equal. I don't know how many times I have to say that. We know that separate is not equal. So what do you do?
Even if it was equal, like, what's the value in separate?
Sure. But sure. Diversity is important. Absolutely. For diversity's sake.
Yeah.
We know that. So, okay, what do you do about it? What do you do? Well, I was knocking on tons of doors of people who were going to put the for sale sign out, both black and white. It's not just a white issue. It's a money issue in some cases.
I think it's safe to say that people of all races love their children.
With means they want to go, and I don't blame them. But no one's talking to these parents. No one is saying to these parents, well, what if we got everybody in the neighborhood, or what if we got a critical mass of parents together and you all decided to choose that school together? Then you'd have the school that you want without having to leave the city and your wonderful neighbors and your beautiful old house. Mm-hmm. But you all have to go together, and we can have the socioeconomic diversity that we're looking for. Great Schools for All is a local group. They want to do a regional magnet school. That's their approach. They're even talking to U of R employees who are like, we want to choose a city, but we want an option. Take those employees and get all their kids together and then put them together with and get a diverse group of kids, some of whom are disadvantaged. Put them all together and you'll have the wonderful school that you're looking for. That's what we need to do. No one is having that conversation. It's uncomfortable.
It is. It's one of those convoluted topics that there's...
How do you ask a parent to do that?
Yeah.
I think you
who wants to be the first one?
You can't. So that's why you got to ask everybody to go together.
Right.
It has to be a plan. There has to probably be some sort of advocacy group, maybe through Rochester Young Professionals, whose kids, a lot of them are starting to have children and that kind of thing. You've got to do it. You've got to do it through a group. And it has to be from the ground up, I think, in some cases. But I think there's a role for the superintendent. There's a role for the mayor. There's a role for the school board. Someone's got to have that conversation with the parents. But it cannot be. It cannot be. We need white kids to go to our schools. It can't be that. What it needs to be is we need everyone to invest. We need everyone in the city to invest in our schools.
And you have to have somebody,
Everyone has to be tied in.
It has to be the person who communicates this idea to people has to be somebody that people are A, going to want to listen to, and B, are going to be able to trust. And I don't think you have that in the current administration. I don't know anybody who wants to hear.
But what you do have, though, is you have a whole bunch of people who don't want to leave their houses and don't want to leave their neighbors and really love where they live. Mm-hmm. That's what you have.
Oh, for sure.
So how do you take that and turn it into the next
turn it into
step?
the will to
turn it into the. So my mother used to say, she's a guidance counselor at Marshall High where I went, and she used to say, well, if everybody would just stop going to Aquinas and go to Marshall, they'd have Aquinas at Marshall.
True story.
So it's one of those chicken and egg issues that we have to solve. And so that was a really long answer to your question.
That's okay. It took up exactly the right amount of time.
Way to stretch,
we're done.
Rachel.
Yes,
Way
we
to
are.
stretch.
We have wrapped it all up. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us here on AirWreck Radio.
I am just so grateful that I got to see you guys. I'm so appreciative of your help last year, and I really hope we can work together again.
I'd be happy to do whatever we can, whenever we.
I'm not
whenever
done.
You're doing something we care about.
Don't count me out. Don't count me out yet.
we knew that for sure. Thank you for coming in, Rachel.
No, before we called you, or before we reached out to you, I said, go ahead and play the music.
Well, just Twitter plugs, your pack, anything you want.
You can find me at Rach Barnhart on Twitter, and just search my name on Facebook, always around a dialogue. And RochesterForAll.com is our new website.
All right. Thank you very much. Listeners, check us out on AirWreckRadio.com for the podcast. Tonight we're going to be talking about a brand new sci-fi book. Follow me at Spacely Cox.
At C-Pain Run.
We'll see you next week.
The sun rising high. There's nothing to do around here. And if there was, well, I wouldn't try. Taking my comforts, taking good care of me. Sitting down in my easy chair, taking a sip of my sassafras tea. Now wouldn't you know it, there goes the phone again. It's probably just another wrong number, but someone trying to sell me something I can't even see. Well, I got the solution. Just sit down in my easy chair and take a big sip of my sassafras tea. It's getting near evening. Sun rolling down. I guess I should shake a leg, climb in my car and roll downtown. Check out the city lights, all decked out in a tux and a tie. But I'm sitting in my easy chair, taking a sip of my sassafras. solution. I know how to set him free. Set him down in my easy chair and give him a sip of my sassafras tea.